Hello, welcome to Stayfit with Joy. Today I'm going to show you how to make my recipe for baked apples and acorn squash. It is September, so we're moving into the fall, and my kids are back in school, so hooray for that. I can start making some more videos for you guys. Because I'll have a little bit more time on my hands and the kids will be out of the way, so I will be able to start sending out some more videos just like this one. And again, I'm going to be making the acorn squash with baked apples, which is on my website. It's baked apples and acorn squash. So what you will need is a baking tray. I'm taking a piece of nonstick foil that I'm going to place down. You want to have an acorn squash, some apples, which I have two different kinds. I'm going to use a Granny Smith for a little bit of a sour, and then a Gala apple for a little bit of sweet. You'll need some cinnamon, nutmeg, and a healthy oil. I think I'm going to go with some coconut oil today because I feel like that will pair well with the apples. So once you get that acorn squash, you're going to cut it in half lengthwise. So make sure you have a cutting board and you have a nice strong knife that you can cut that acorn squash in half with. And once you get it cut in half, you're going to scoop out the middle. You'll get all the seeds and all of that kind of pulpy stuff out of it, so that you have a nice hollowed out center that will be able to put the apples in. Also preheat your oven to 350 before you even wind up cutting the acorn squash, because you want to get that oven started and ready to go. We're going to first be cooking the acorn squash upside down. We'll prep the apples and get those set, and once the acorn squash gets nice and cooked through, we'll turn it over and place the apples in it. But we want to get a little bit of a brown and softness to those acorn squashes first. So I'm going to actually rub a little bit of my oil onto the acorn squash to start. I'm going to take a little bit of a brush. I'm going to dip it into the coconut oil that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to wipe down the outside just on that acorn squash, just to give it a little bit of a non-stick surface. Not much, just a very little bit. And then we're going to turn these face down on our baking tray so that it looks like, you can see this, looks like this, face down. And I'm going to put that in the oven, and I'm going to let it cook until the skin gets soft and until the inside gets soft. So I'll just kind of test it by placing a fork in it and making sure that it's soft. So we're going to place that in the oven and let that cook. So I'm going to wash and take the skin off of my apples. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I want to just kind of peel it all the way around. And then we're going to dice them up nice and small and place them into our mixing bowl. Okay, so once you get those apples peeled, I just give them a nice rinse. And I'm going to dice them up so that I can mix all of my spices into it and my oil and get them prepped for the center of that acorn squash when it gets done. Acorn squash with the baked apples is such a nice fall recipe to have. It's just warm. It's got some sweetness to it. And it's just very nice side dish, or even as a meal or a snack. It's just really makes me think of the fall weather when we start to get into those squash recipes and the apple recipes. So these are two fall favorites of mine, the acorn squash and apples as far as the fruit goes. So I really love putting them together and making a nice warm dish that just kind of complements each other. So once you get those apples done, nice and diced up, just place them into a mixing bowl. And if you are measuring your oil, you're going to want to measure out how much of it you use to put in to your recipe. I am going to use a tablespoon, maybe 1 tablespoon of that coconut oil. And that will be for probably 2 servings for each half. Okay, so once I get that, just kind of mix that coconut oil all together with the apples. And then you just want to sprinkle on some cinnamon and nutmeg. And just let that sit until your acorn squash is cooked through. You get the spices, the cinnamon. Here's the cinnamon, and you just want to shake it on. Get a nice coating of cinnamon on it. And then get some nutmeg and do the same thing. So the nutmeg you may not use as much as the cinnamon, but I like to get a nice sprinkle in there. And then I'm going to coat that all up with the coconut oil, cinnamon, nutmeg, and I'm going to let that sit out on my counter until the acorn squash is done. Let it just kind of seep together. And when the acorn squash is soft enough, I'll turn it over. I'll put the apples into the center and then bake it until the apples get soft. And you'll have a nice little complement side dish, meal, or snack. Okay, so the acorn squash is nice and soft and out of the oven, so I am going to take it out and flip it over. So let me just show you what we're doing here. I flip this over, it's nice and soft. See, I can stick my fork in, it's super soft. Okay, so now I'm going to take the apples that have been sitting and I'm going to put them right in the center of the acorn squash. I'm just going to divide them up into both parts. I'm going to make this one, I'm going to get this one, make a little bit more of a hole so it's a little deeper. And then I'm going to just throw this back in the oven. Now with the side up with the apples in the center. I'm going to let it cook just until the apples get nice and soft, and then it's going to be all done and ready to cool and eat, okay? So I'm just showing you the apples that are going to go into the oven, and they're in the center of the acorn squash. I'm going to put that in and bake it until I can stick a fork into the apples, and then we'll take it out. And here's the final recipe out of the oven: baked apples and acorn squash, browned on the top and cooked through.